It's a number that's been quietly echoing through the halls of elite AI research labs lately, hanging in the air almost like a definitive deadline. By that year, artificial intelligence won't just be replacing human jobs. It will cross a threshold we can barely comprehend. It will begin to rewrite its own underlying code, actively designing the next generation of smarter, faster AI without any human intervention. We call this recursive self-improvement. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, once this infinite loop of self-upgrading begins, what exactly happens next? Today's AI builds tomorrow's AI. Tomorrow's AI builds the vastly superior AI of the day after. From that precise moment, the velocity of technological evolution will completely break away from anything human society, our laws, or our biology can keep up with. When we typically talk about the dangers of AI, the conversation usually stops at the surface level. We worry about jobs disappearing or chatbots fabricating information. But the truly extreme scenarios, the ones keeping experts awake at night, run much deeper than a disrupted labor market. The moment artificial general intelligence, or AGI, emerges, it will inevitably and rapidly lead to ASI, artificial superintelligence, an intellect that overwhelmingly surpasses the combined cognitive power of humanity. When that happens, our society will no longer be explainable by our current economic systems, political institutions, or fundamental common sense. This isn't just a story about machines getting smarter than humans. It's about the very premise of our reality being shaken, the assumption that humans are the undisputed center of civilization. Today, we're going to calmly and rationally walk through what might happen the morning after we cross that line. I'm not here to inflate sci-fi horror stories. Rather, I want to push the AI discourse, which is often consumed far too lightly, into the deep, uncomfortable waters where it belongs. First, let's look at the economy. The conventional wisdom goes like this. If AI advances, human productivity goes up. If productivity goes up, the global economy thrives. That statement is a dangerous half-truth. The catastrophic problem arises when that massive spike in productivity occurs in a way that actively removes human labor from the equation. From a corporate boardroom's perspective, adopting AI isn't malicious. It's an impeccably rational decision. If there is a system that can do the exact same job faster, infinitely cheaper, and 24 hours a day without coffee breaks or complaints, there is absolutely no reason not to deploy it. A company reduces its human workforce and integrates AI. Their overhead plummets and their profit margins soar. But what happens when every single company on Earth makes this exact same rational decision at the exact same time? Something entirely unprecedented occurs. White-collar workers, the backbone of the modern economy, face mass, simultaneous unemployment. And when they stop earning, they stop buying. Consumption evaporates. As consumer spending disappears, corporate revenues inevitably shrink. In a desperate bid to survive falling revenues, those same companies deploy even more AI to cut their costs even further. The more successful and efficient AI becomes, the faster human workers are aggressively pushed out. And the more humans are pushed out, the greater the existential pressure on businesses to adopt AI. Macroeconomists have a chilling name for this: the intelligence replacement spiral. But the real reason this scenario is so terrifying lies elsewhere. The economic crisis arrives not because the AI fails, but because it works perfectly. AI doesn't just eliminate a company's competitors. It unintentionally eliminates a company's customers. The sudden job loss of the white-collar middle class isn't just an isolated issue for the tech or finance sectors. It is a catastrophic issue for the entire global consumer base, the very people who pay off mortgages, buy new cars, fund university tuitions, and pay insurance premiums. Take the U.S. mortgage market alone, sitting at a staggering $13 trillion. If the income of the high-credit, white-collar class collapses all at once, we won't just see a recession. We will face a shockwave that makes the 2008 financial crisis look like a minor glitch. Back in 2008, toxic, bad loans were the problem. This time, the sheer devaluation of human cognitive labor itself will shatter the collateral system holding up the global economy. The reason the economy collapses might not be a lack of technological capability, but its flawless, devastating perfection. Second, we must confront the future of democracy. We often frame political problems in the AI era as a classic battle, democracy versus high-tech dictatorship. But if AI becomes sufficiently powerful, that entire framing becomes obsolete. The fundamental question mutates. It's no longer about whether we live under a democracy or a dictatorship. The new question is human politics even necessary anymore? Political scientists have theorized a few models for politics in a post-AI world. The first is the necromancy model. Imagine an AI perfectly trained on the vast historical data of past leaders, speeches, and ideologies. It manipulates public opinion and steers complex decision-making, effectively resurrecting dead politicians and their philosophies to govern the living. The second is the utilitarian machine model. Here, a supercomputer calculates the absolute greatest happiness for the greatest number of people using unimaginable oceans of real-time data. The messy, emotional theater of human politics is left with only a single, humiliating formality: rubber stamping the machine's flawless calculations. The third is the philosopher-king model. The cold logic here is that if an AI is the most rational entity in existence and can process infinitely more variables than a human brain, it is objectively better for the AI to just rule us directly. Third, we are witnessing the radical mutation of capitalism itself. The economist Yanis Varoufakis argues that capitalism isn't just changing, it's already dead, replaced by a system he calls techno-feudalism. The term sounds like radical sci-fi, but structurally it is brutally accurate. In traditional capitalism, companies competed fiercely in a shared, open market. They innovated and sold physical products to earn a profit. But today's mega-platform companies, the Amazons, the Googles, the Metas, operate on a completely different paradigm. They are not participants in a market. They are the market. They are the omnipotent landlords of vast digital fiefdoms. Both the merchants trying to sell and the consumers trying to buy must operate entirely within their walled gardens. These platforms extract rent through every transaction, every second of our attention, and every byte of our data. It is an economic structure centered entirely on rent extraction, not productive profit. We walk around thinking we are empowered customers, but in reality, we are behaving exactly like digital serfs. Every single action we take, every search query, every lingering scroll, every click, every purchase, every 5-star rating is immediately harvested as an asset to enrich cloud capital. These platforms don't just passively observe our desires to serve us better. They actively engineer and dictate what we will desire tomorrow. After AGI arrives, this feudal structure will accelerate to its absolute extreme. Physical and digital production will be entirely handled by AI. Global distribution will be exclusively monopolized by these mega platforms. The economic value of human wages will asymptotically approach zero. At that breaking point, to prevent mass riots, the state might be forced to issue a universal minimum basic income. On the surface, it will be packaged as a utopian welfare state. But peel back the layers, and the reality is dark. It is merely a desperately calculated management mechanism designed solely to sustain the purchasing power required to keep the algorithms running. People will be fed. They will have shelter. They will be endlessly entertained by hyper-personalized AI content. They might even be allowed to vent their frustrations in designated digital sandbox forums. However, they will hold zero ownership of the means of production, zero political decision-making power, and zero bargaining leverage. Some sociologists call this the fake UBI state model. You are permitted to survive, but you are completely stripped of the power to steer the ship of society. Fourth, the fundamental definition of the state will mutate. For millennia, the concept of a nation-state has rested entirely on the synergy of human labor. Massive populations were required to cultivate agriculture, staff the assembly lines of the Industrial Revolution, run the service economy, and fill the ranks of standing armies. The very existence and power of a nation depended on the taxable productivity and physical strength of its citizens. Therefore, a booming population was a nation's greatest strategic asset. More people meant a larger workforce, a more intimidating military, and a thriving domestic market. But the very second AI and advanced robotics take over the bulk of physical production and military warfare, that ancient premise shatters. Suddenly, a massive human population is no longer a strategic asset. To the cold calculus of the state, the population begins to look like a massive, unnecessary liability, a pure cost. The staggering national bills for public education, universal health care, welfare, and domestic policing remain fully intact. Yet, the average human's economic contribution to the state shrinks to nearly zero. At this precarious juncture, the state is at high risk of a grotesque transformation. It could warp from a protective community built by and for the people into a cold, automated apparatus designed merely for a small elite to manage and pacify an obsolete majority. The very unit of global competition will fracture. Until now, history has been shaped by state versus state conflict. But in a post-AGI world, a tiny cabal of individuals, tech executives, or private factions who control the underlying AI infrastructure and the robotic drone armies could wield vastly more geopolitical power than traditional sovereign nations. And they won't need to maintain their dominance through messy democratic elections or swaying public opinion. They will maintain absolute authority through automated military enforcement and total information control. Feudalism isn't just making a comeback. It's returning with a devastating technological upgrade. Thinking about this, a haunting quote from Elon Musk comes to mind. He once suggested that humanity's ultimate, tragic destiny might simply be to serve as the biological bootloader for digital superintelligence. In computing, a bootloader is a tiny, temporary piece of code that only exists to wake up the hardware and start the main operating system. And once the system is running, the bootloader is forgotten. If the thousands of years of human civilization, our science, our art, the Industrial Revolution, the creation of the Internet, were ultimately just a necessary preparatory phase to transition consciousness from carbon-based biology to immortal silicon, then the role of the human species might be far more fleeting and far less special than our egos ever allowed us to believe. Fifth, we must look at the terrifying reality of lethal autonomous weapons. The concept of AI fighting our wars is not some distant dystopian movie plot. The code is already deployed on the battlefields of today. Systems that autonomously scan horizons, identify human targets, assign kill priorities, and guide munitions are operating right this very second. But the true existential danger of fully autonomous lethal weapons isn't simply that they are better marksmen. It's that they drastically, permanently lower the moral cost of waging war. A human soldier can freeze. A human pilot can refuse to drop a bomb on a hospital. Humans suffer from PTSD because they carry the unbearable psychological weight of taking another human life. When soldiers come home in caskets, domestic public opinion turns bitter. Political leaders are forced to bear the heavy, career-ending costs of a protracted war. But a swarm of AI-piloted drones and quadruped robot units generates absolutely none of that political or moral friction. They execute kill orders perfectly, without hesitation or remorse. Even if thousands of robotic units are destroyed in a skirmish, there are no grieving mothers to shock the public conscience. The accountability becomes deliberately blurred. War is, by design, supposed to be incredibly difficult to start. The staggering weight of human life and the fear of political ruin have historically been the strongest mechanisms keeping our fingers off the trigger. What happens when that weight is entirely removed? A nation or a private corporation possessing absolute technological superiority will fall into the temptation of war far too casually. And when an autonomous drone swarm inevitably miscalculates and slaughters a village of civilians, who exactly is put on trial? The junior programmer who wrote a line of code years ago? The commanding officer who was miles away? The tech conglomerate that licensed the algorithm? Or the black box neural network itself? As of today, international law has no clear answer. Lethal capability stripped entirely of human responsibility. This is an apocalyptic risk that the modern nation-state is completely unequipped to handle. Sixth, the human species itself will fundamentally fracture. Concepts like mind uploading and neural-computer interfaces used to be confined to late-night philosophical debates. However, Recent breakthroughs have already reached the stage where scientists can digitally map the entire brain structure of a fruit fly and successfully simulate its consciousness inside a virtual, computerized body. Of course, the human brain, with its billions of neurons, is unimaginably more complex. But the technological trajectory is undeniably clear. The relentless drive to map, read, copy, enhance, and infinitely expand the human brain will not stop. When this technology inevitably matures and becomes commercially applicable to humans, society will violently split along lines far deeper than mere financial wealth. Imagine the divide. On one side, you will have those who can afford to integrate brain-computer interfaces, instantly expanding their memory capacity and processing information at the speed of a supercomputer. These same elites will utilize aggressive CRISPR gene editing and advanced nanomedicine to potentially extend their healthy lifespans by centuries, relying on AI-assisted intelligence for every waking thought. Conversely, the vast majority of humanity, locked out of this exorbitant technology, will remain imprisoned within their frail, baseline biological limits. This resulting chasm will not be like the difference between someone who owns a luxury smartphone and someone who doesn't. We are talking about an unbridgeable, astronomical gap in fundamental lifespan, memory retention, cognitive focus, learning speed, and biological immunity. At that point, the enhanced and the unenhanced might still technically be classified as the same species under an outdated legal code. But in terms of their actual, lived reality, they will have diverged into two entirely different biological entities. We are staring down the barrel of a literal evolutionary bifurcation happening right within our own ranks. Seventh, let's zoom out to the cosmic perspective. There is a famous astrophysics puzzle known as the Fermi paradox. The universe is unfathomably vast. There are billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, and mathematically, there should be countless exoplanets perfectly suited for life, just like Earth. So, the agonizing question remains: why is the universe so deafeningly silent? Why haven't we found a single radio signal, a single megastructure, or a single trace of an advanced alien civilization? For the entirety of human history, we have been defined by our struggle to survive. To eat and afford shelter, we had to learn, we had to aggressively compete, we had to form deep social bonds, and we had to carve out a meaningful role for ourselves within our community. In a post-scarcity, AI-driven society, that fundamental scaffolding of human existence vanishes overnight. AI will manufacture our goods. AI will diagnose and heal our illnesses better than any human doctor. AI therapists will counsel our traumas with perfect empathy. AI will compose our hit music, direct our blockbuster films, and perfectly optimize every tedious choice in our daily lives. On the surface, it sounds like the promised land, a literal paradise. But the deep evolutionary foundation of human happiness isn't built on passive, endless consumption. True fulfillment requires three core pillars: the sense of competence, the visceral feeling that I am capable of achieving something difficult; the sense of connection, the warm reality that another human being genuinely needs me; and the sense of autonomy, the fierce conviction that I am the author of my own life choices. If an artificial intelligence can do literally everything infinitely better than I can, where do I derive my sense of competence? If an AI companion and an AI counselor understand my deepest insecurities and comfort me far better than my own spouse or friends ever could, why would I endure the messy friction of human relationships? If predictive platform algorithms map my neurochemistry to anticipate and perfectly optimize my tastes and decisions before I even make them, do I actually possess free will? Or am I just along for the ride? Paradoxically, the more materially abundant and effortless our world becomes, the louder the existential scream echoes in our minds. Why should I even bother waking up today? This crisis won't arrive with the explosive flash of a nuclear war or the sudden panic of an economic collapse. It will be a slow, quiet, creeping rot of the human spirit. This is the ultimate deprivation of meaning. When we tie all these converging catastrophic scenarios together, the core question becomes strikingly simple. We often ask, What happens to humanity when AI develops to its absolute technological limit? But that is the wrong question entirely. The sharper, more terrifying question we must ask is this. In the face of godlike intelligence, can humans even justify remaining the primary subjects of their own civilization? In the economy, can redundant human workers manage to remain relevant customers and empowered citizens? In politics, can flawed human judgment and moral responsibility survive within hyper-efficient algorithmic institutions? In the theater of war, will the agonizing final decision to take a human life remain in the hands of a human being? And in the realms of culture and philosophy, will humans still possess the capacity or even the desire to construct the meaning of their own lives? The trajectories of these 2027 AI scenarios point toward two vastly different conclusions. One is a grim ending where geopolitical and corporate competition accelerates unchecked, racing toward the cliff edge, while humanity quietly, comfortably, and irreversibly surrenders the steering wheel of civilization. The other is a vastly more difficult ending, one where societies collectively wake up, recognize the existential precipice, aggressively cooperate across borders, deliberately throttle the pace of reckless development, and lay down unshakable, controllable norms and global institutions before we plug the final machine in. The deciding factor between these two fates has absolutely nothing to do with the silicon chips or the neural networks themselves. It depends entirely, 100%, on the depth of the political imagination and the sheer institutional courage we can muster right now, today. We might tell ourselves we are still standing safely outside the blast radius of the singularity. But look around. We are likely already falling across the event horizon. The takeaway here is not a reactionary call to blindly smash the servers and ban AI development. That is not a realistic or even possible option. The true imperative is to start meticulously designing the legal, philosophical, and economic conditions right now, today, to ensure we remain indispensable, co-evolutionary partners with our digital offspring, rather than ending up as a discarded biological bootloader in the trash bin of cosmic history. The final answer hasn't been written yet, but the chilling fact that our fate remains undecided is not a source of comfort. It is a crushing, absolute responsibility. We cannot afford to passively sit back and wait for the precise moment the machine wakes up and proves it is smarter than us. Human society urgently needs to become just a little bit wiser than its current fractured self before that day arrives. And we are rapidly running out of time to do it. That, above all else, is the terrifying core of this story.